office, and we've got a number of cases which are ongoing, and I'll stop there because I want Jackie to speak to you, and I'll finish up at the end.
They're going to pay the price. They will pay the price.
I want to say as well that it was very brave of you to come along today as well, because marching from City Hall with empty prams, it's not easy, and many people have been put through traumas which they should not be put through. I'll close there for a second. I'll hand over to Jackie.
Can you hear me okay for this? Okay. Okay, I'm not that used to speaking on a microphone, so give me a minute. But I'm going to say mums and dads. Some of you do know me as a social worker working for Neil, trying to help parents. But before I became a social worker, I was a social scientist. I trained as a social scientist, which leaves me interested in patterns, okay, and the patterns that have been coming out of our work. Now, when Neil first asked me to help, I wasn't clear why so many constituents were having so much difficulty with children's services. Parents asked for help to do with children in care, but also to try to stop children going into care. So, first step, work out what's going on. 3 years later, I'm still asking that question. What on earth has been going on? There are patterns. For example, almost every family that came to us had either a parent or a child with a long-standing illness or a disability that Children's Services showed very little interest in. It's harder to cope with visits and meetings with Children's Services when you are managing symptoms. It's even harder when there's no recognition of pain or anxiety, and parents are misunderstood and disbelieved. But ill health and disability are still a normal part of family life. And it's just that parents are forced to manage differently, and there is a law that's supposed to protect them. So disability, including mental health, is protected, it's a protected characteristic under the Equalities Act. Cardiff Children's Services are meant to think about how their policies or decisions affect people protected under the Equality Act. And that's on top of their duty not to discriminate. Dyslexia makes it harder to cope with Children's Services, the reams of paper that you get. And parents who are also carers are not getting proper recognition for their efforts either. Now, I'm not seeing any patterns of reasonable adjustments being made by Children's Services. Just a fortnight ago, a dad described asking a children's social worker for help with his adult disabled son. She told him that it wasn't her job. Instead of assisting the family, Children's Services forcibly removed his younger child into care. Now, maybe she didn't know that she should have referred for disability and carers assessments, but he thought she wasn't interested. Cardiff Council has an equal opportunities policy saying that no service user should be treated less favourably on the grounds of disability. Kids should not be disappearing into care because their birth families are coping with illness. I'm seeing no understanding of these extra layers of difficulties for families. And is it any wonder that relationships between parents and social services break down and end up in family court? So where is the justice in all this? It gets worse. When Children's Services decide to remove a child, parents suddenly find themselves traumatised, but on a sort of conveyor belt, having to repeat their story again and again to busy professionals, to lawyers and barristers and judges who all assume that social services reports are fair and accurate. But I've seen plenty that are not. Poor reports that leave out issues of disability and illness, even adding issues that don't exist to become the basis for further expert testimony, so the picture becomes even more distorted and it's overwhelming. Trying to correct information, especially for people who are unwell. So many of the people we've tried to help have been so affected, trying to challenge that inaccurate information, that existing medical conditions are made much worse. Added to that, lots of people are told, I bet some people here have been told this, you're not allowed to talk about what happens in family court. Well, that is a really isolating thing to be told. But it's not true. Majesty's courts and tribunal services have actually published the rules on that. If you do a search on EX710, it's useful. It's called Can I Talk About My Case Outside Court? That says that parents can talk to any person you think is appropriate to get confidential advice, to help you present your case, to get support during proceedings. Discussions must be private, but you can get help to get mediation or with a complaint. And you can share most written information with the people you are seeking help from. Yet when I first turned up at Cardiff Family Court to support a constituent, we were told by a barrister, no less, I wasn't allowed to see the court papers. He wasn't allowed to show them to me. He was. This barrister was quite insistent that I wasn't allowed to see any of this. And also, how many of us know that the media are allowed to attend family proceedings? There are important rules, but they can attend. So how isolated and alone have parents been made to feel in the face of all this? Children's services have a public sector equality duty, and I quote, all managers at all levels of the organisation are responsible for actively promoting equality and removing discrimination, and that means social work managers. And all employees at all levels of the organisation are responsible for following the principles of that policy, and that means social workers. And if you look, the protected characteristics are not just about disability, they include things like sex, and that's to do with, I feel, the misogyny that I've been seeing, in which women are stereotyped in the expectations that are made about them. And it's very difficult, so in response, I think I've met quite a stream of what I would call very fusty women trying to stand up for their kids. So, where is the justice in all this? Having a child removed via the courts is traumatic. It's traumatic for the child and for the parents. It is an absolute shock. There are about 900 children, Cardiff children in care, some placed across Britain in children's homes and foster care. Their parents mostly describe an enormously stressful experience, worrying about their kids, struggling to get information, and always feeling that whatever they have to offer isn't valued. Added to that, a very fast turnover of staff here in Cardiff, so that it never seems to be the same manager or social worker for more than a few months. And any build-up of goodwill gets reset to zero by each change. Helpful arrangements get set back, and it goes on for years. A local authority has a legal duty to promote reasonable contact. They have a legal duty to consult parents of children in care, who are often the only people with accurate and useful information about a child. Parents know previous medical histories, the names and addresses of best friends and cousins. This is all regularly overlooked. Foster parents don't want to meet them. It was bad before COVID, it's even worse now. And there is a huge toll on the health of parents who do end up in hospital, told that their health has been made much worse by stress, dealing with social services. So, what's the bigger picture? And I'm conscious of time here, but I want to make one point. I've just started looking into the profits made by foster caring associations. Now, I'm not talking about your average foster carer here, but recently I've had time to research one organisation at random via Company's House, after a parent told me that his child was placed with them. That organisation in turn had a parent company, which owned other fostering organisations and children's homes, and was again owned by another parent company. Eventually, I traced that ownership back to Jersey via Luxembourg, And although their accountants didn't advertise how much profit they were making, they said we could write to them for that. The public accounts showed that they were comfortable borrowing over £500 million against the profits expected from local authorities in the future. Now that's not just Cardiff now, they charge councils from all across Britain, but they're not the only company. There are hundreds of fostering companies registered with Companies House. Now I doubt that foster carers know how much profit is being made via their work, but someone in Cardiff Council ought to know what they are contributing to. So many people are desperate to have their children returned. And let me tell you, one good route out of care is through regular, good quality contact between parents and children, because it lets both child and adult rebuild confidence in the relationship. So nothing has been more surprising to me than the reluctance of children's services to get creative and promote good meetings, good contact experiences for families. Instead, this has been outsourced to yet another private company. But here's the thing, private organisations carrying out public functions must always also comply with the public sector equality duty. They're not supposed to discriminate either. The law expects reasonable contact. Yet, if a child shows naturally strong emotions because they miss the people they used to live with, because they were well attached to their family, because they feel hurt and angry at losing everyone they used to love, then there is a very strong chance that carers won't be able to handle that child's powerful reaction. So children's services respond by reducing contact. It ought to go the other way to take the heat out of it, but instead they prioritise the placement over the child's longer-term relationships. Parents are told that more contact will undermine the placement. You could hear that in another way. More contact will undermine somebody paying back £500 million. So by reducing their meetings, the local authority effectively reduces the chance of that child ever returning from care and adds significantly to the profits of care providers. If Cardiff wants to reduce the number of children in care, I'd start by reviewing for any history of disability discrimination and put some serious thought into good quality contact. Now I want that in the interest of fairness for families, but councils might also want to save hundreds of thousands of pounds in addition to supporting happier families.